that I could have showed you some of them, but they're so, what's the right word? They speak down, talk down, put down women in such horrible ways. Now, I don't think we're perfect yet, but there was one commercial for ketchup. And, it's about women always have to be in the kitchen. So there was this whole perspective of what life was all about. There was also, this is going back, it's more than 40 years, my guess. It's early 70s, late 60s. And it was somebody smoking a Camel cigarette. And the ad was 9 out of 10 doctors recommend Camel. Smoking Camel cigarettes. I was like, whoa, okay. Things are a bit different. There's countries now that are literally banning smoking completely. And Canada's wrestling with where do we sit on that one. Okay, so that's how the culture's changed. How has church changed?
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Is God's being taken out of the school?
Okay, so we've had a huge separation of our faith and the school, etc. I was just having that conversation earlier this week. I remember in elementary school, there would be time for the Lord's Prayer. And I was like, is that true? And then somebody said, yeah, I remember that too.
And reading the Bible.
Yeah, so, wow. Just probably shows how old I am, but okay. How has the church changed? Well, that might be the result, yeah, and I don't disagree. We're going to talk about that in a second. But actually, practically, how has the church changed over the last couple of generations? I mean, here's an easy one. Go ahead.
The seeker-sensitive movement.
So what did it do to us?
It made us cautious to be bold.
Oh, okay. Go a bit further. I like this. What is this?
Well, we didn't just say, Jesus saves and you need Jesus, come and repent. We started saying, Jesus will meet your needs.
Wow, that's really astute. I didn't think you were going to go there, but I like where you went. I think it's so true. It's Jesus will meet your needs, Jesus will fix everything. So it's become a very consumer. I thought you were going more down the lines of, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow a little bit. We stopped introducing our friends to Jesus. We just invited them to church.
Exactly.
Right?
We missed the power person and came to the
Yeah,
place.
excellent. Here's a low-hanging fruit one. We changed from choirs and hymns to choruses, right? I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. That was an easy one. What are some other ones?
Mega churches.
Okay, sizes of churches. We went to something that gets a lot bigger.
And about
The personality.
the
Yeah.
person, personality, instead
Yeah.
of following Jesus, it's about the person.
Yeah, very astute.
Very good stuff. Well, we even started calling churches so-and-so's church, Pastor so-and-so's church, rather than, than the tab even. We went from a name to it being that personality. Maybe all the denominations, maybe the thousands of different denominations makes it a little challenging. There's more, I suppose.
There were a lot back then, but there's even more now, yeah, for sure. Would it be fair for me to say that there's been a lot of changes in the culture, but there's also a lot of changes in the church? The issue, though, is that the changes in the church really just followed many of the changes in the culture just a few years later. What's behind that?
I think the churches in general too have avoided talking about a lot of truths and because they don't want to offend people. So progressivism. Truths in the Bible are not really being, talked about and as much as it used to be. Avoided sometimes because they don't want to offend people.
And
Everything goes. Everything goes. Yeah. Overflow, everything goes.
I wonder if the world has influenced the church more than the church has influenced the world.
there you go. I'm going to come to a fancy word for that in just a second. Okay, where did that go? I had a good thought. That was a great comment that you just had.
When was the last time you heard in church repent? Or the word sin?
I think what's underneath all of this for us, and this is part of what we're going to tease out this weekend, we have so depended on our strength to accomplish building a church instead of depending on God. So my intent this weekend is not to shoot at the church. I love the church. My intent with us this weekend is, if you can say that you've fallen a little bit more in love with Jesus this weekend, fantastic. If you can...
You got a thumbs up.
Huh?
That's another thing that changed at church.
Yeah, response from the... If we can love Jesus more by the end of this weekend together, we've done well. If we can love the bride more, we've done well. If we can not throw rocks at the bride, but actually realize we are the bride and we're throwing rocks at ourselves, whose fault is it? It's our fault. And so I think there's some things that we need to pay attention to. So, okay, this next slide here, you've got this, I think, on your sheets. Look at this. We're on page 6 already. Unfortunately, we don't go this fast all the way through page 20. I think 40 years ago, the church was at the center of culture, marked by the circle on the left. There's the X right in the middle, right? Everything happened around the church. You can't find many of them anymore, but do you remember the old $5 bills? They were blue, and they had a picture of kids skating on an ice rink on the bill. And if you had amazing eyes or a magnifying glass, you could read the little poem. It's a Canadian poem that was actually on our $5 bill. Do you remember what it said? Did anybody ever read that little poem? It's a famous Canadian poem. It basically said, I won't get it word for word at this point, but the winters of our youth were spent in 3 places: the church, the school, and the hockey rink. But our real life was spent on the rink. There was something that shifted, because it used to be that it was like there was always a church in the middle of town. Life revolved around the church. Somewhere, somehow, we go over to the circle on the right, where the church is no longer in the middle. It's moved to the margins. Now, I have a confession to make to you. I made this diagram years ago, and I think I need to remake it. How would you remake this diagram? Where is the church now in relationship to culture? So it's on the margin. Okay, I think that was a while ago. Where is it now? Off the screen. Yeah, it could be off the screen. Although, here's how I think I should redo the diagram. I think it needs to be multiple circles, not just one circle. Multiple circles, multiple worldviews, and the X so far, like literally almost at the edge of the page. Like, we are not relevant in the slightest to our culture. So why do we keep doing the same things? Say that again. Sure. The church can do the business it was ordained to do. I want to give you, a friend of mine from Chicago first named these, and I think we could do more, but I want to do 3 of them with you. The culture's changed, the church has changed, the culture's view of the church has changed. We live in, and you've heard lots of these, we live in a post era. Post this, post that, post all kinds of things. I think we live in a post-attractional era. We're back to seeker-targeted, seeker-friendly, right? Everybody would come to church to find the answers to their questions. In fact, if you go all the way back, wasn't Reg Bibby from Lethbridge? Reg wrote this book. We're back in the 90s. And he did a huge poll across the country. And he said, if you go and ask 100 people in a neighborhood, they have spiritual questions, where are they going for the answers? What do you think he found? 1990s. How many do you think? Out of 100. How many of them are going to go to church to find the answers to their questions? In the 90s? It was 50. 50% of people. If you have spiritual questions you need answers to, where are you going to find the answer? Church. 50%. 1 out of 2. He did the same thing again. I think it was like 2010 or 2011 or something. 20 years later, generation later. What did he find? What was the number? 10. And I think it was propped up by the Maritimes. You know what it is in Vancouver? 2%. Massive shift. And so let me ask you then, so when we planted our church, we were in the 90s. So guess what we did? We did fun, creative things at the church, and people would come because, there's a new little church around the corner, and they're doing fun things, and I could tell you story after story after story. Some of them are crazy, some of them are fun. God used it, and he brought people, and people gave their lives to the Lord. I was telling a story earlier this week. I had a group of pastors into Vancouver, and we hung out for the week. And one of the stories was God was at work in some of these people. And we would tell stories in the service, and one lady puts her hand up, and she says, I know God's at work in my life. I said, Sally, how do you know God's at work in your life? She says, well, I used to drink 18 beer on the weekend. I'm down to 6. But you know what? God was at work in her life. And I know it's not a typical church story that we'd hear, but he was doing something in her. We had lots of crazy stories. But it was easy to draw a crowd. I'm not sure that helped us a lot. I think we've fallen into a rut where we think that somehow if we make Sunday a little better, people will come. Draw a big line under this if you write it down. I don't care what you do on Sunday morning, they're not coming. This many will. So something has to change. We're in a post-authoritarian era. What's that mean? Sometimes I still go down to the States and teaching down the States in various churches, the pastor's still got, a parking spot, or he's got free membership into the golf club, or we used to live in a world where the church had some respect. Pastors had some sort of respect. Now, this isn't I'm railing on the culture because it doesn't treat me very well anymore. That's just not my point. Same thing happens with teachers. Same thing happens with doctors. Used to be when I got sick as a kid, Mom would march me off to the doctor and we'd listen to what the doctor had to say. And we'd do it. What do you do now when you get sick? You Google it. And then when you go to the doctor, what do? Tell him what he needs to do or what she needs to do in writing a prescription. Okay, I'm exaggerating a tiny little bit, but not much. We live in a post-authoritarian. And no longer, why do we think that because the church says it, it's going to carry any weight? You guys were laughing a little bit with thumbs up on the screen a little bit before. This happened in one of our services a number of years ago. So I'm preaching, and there's a guy there listening, and I said something, and I could see it caught his attention. So he pulls out his iPad, and he starts messing around on his iPad. And I'm thinking, this is one of our early services, and it was like, I don't know, 9:30 a.m. or something, and I know that the football games hadn't started, so he wasn't checking the scores of the football games. He wasn't doing that. I couldn't figure out what he was doing on his iPad. So he comes up to me at the end of the service, and he says, you know that point you made about ABC? Yeah. That's wrong. And I said, what do you mean it's wrong? And so he starts talking to me about it, and I said, well, we should get together and we should talk about this more. He was dead right. I was wrong, right? And I was ever so grateful that he cared enough to be able to actually look it up. Now, it used to be that people would, oh, the pastor said it, and he's got all these degrees, and so therefore it must be right. We live in a post-authoritarian, and some of it's good. I'm not all opposed to all of it. Some of it's not quite so good. But post-attractional, post-authoritarian. Here's a third post. Fancy word, post-universal language. What's that mean? It means that not everybody knows the story. And sometimes we begin to tell the story as if everybody knows what we're talking about. Everybody thinks we're speaking their language, and people don't have a clue. I don't know if it's true in Lethbridge. I'm suspicious it might be. But I know that in Vancouver, like if we go to the UBC campus, there are lots of students you can say, tell me something you know about Jesus, and they'll say, who? They literally won't even have heard of Jesus. And you're saying, come on, this is Canada. No, they don't even know the name of Jesus, let alone lots about him, right? So this is going back 7 years ago now. It was my wife's 50th birthday. And she's from England. And English people do not like you to make a big fuss. So I was given very clear instructions several months before the 50th. She says, I know you Canadians. I know what you like to do. You like to make a big deal at somebody's 50th birthday. That's a big one. And so you have a party and you say lots of nice things. Don't you dare. No parties, no nice things said about me. Just can't do it. I'm thinking, I better be careful, but forget that. We're going to have a celebration. We're going to have a party. So I said, well, we're having a party, but I'll be gentle on what we say. She goes, no, you can't say nice things. You just have a party. I'll let you get away with that. So I think we had 50 people over, maybe 60. Crammed them in our house. There were probably 20 from the church, 20 from the neighborhood, 20 from her tennis club. Okay, it might not have been quite that, but you get the idea. And we have a friend, his name was Brett, and Brett came along. Brett's not a follower of Jesus. There was probably half to two-thirds Christians and half almost that were not Christians. Brett wasn't a follower of Jesus. He comes to the party, and we're having a nice time, lots of food, and people are mixing and mingling, and it's great. And then at one point, I've planned this. Now, I'm not allowed to say nice things, but I said, I called everybody together. We're all in the same place. Everybody's quiet. And I said, we're celebrating Shelley. And I just asked a few people to pray about Shelley and how she's influenced their lives. Now, this was my little way around the not saying nice things. Because if it's in prayer, you can't criticize it, right? Like you just have to go with it. So I had 6 or 7 people pray and just thank God for Shelley and how much she meant to them and how she didn't, influence their life. And then at the end, I got our worship guy, Craig, who was there. I got him to sing 2 songs. One was Happy Birthday, and the second was Amazing Grace, because I figured, half the room's not Christian, but, let's sing those 2 songs. And so we prayed, we sang, it was all done, everybody went home. Brett texts me the next day. He goes, thanks for inviting me. He said, had a great time. In fact, those church people that you hang out with, some of them are actually quite nice. And I thought, oh, okay, that's good. We did okay. And then he says, what was that song we sang? He's texting all this, right? And I said, happy birthday. We usually sing it at birthday parties, don't you? And he said, not that one, the other one. And I thought, oh my goodness. Here's a 50-year-old man in Canada that doesn't know Amazing Grace. This is post-universal language. We keep thinking that we can tell the story using the same kind of language. And we wonder why it's not landing, or why people are not, they're looking at us like, post-attractional, I don't care what you do on Sunday, they're not coming. Post-authoritarian, your words don't carry the same weight they used to. Post-universal language, we have to come up with other ways of communicating the good news of Jesus. So we need to maybe consider a shift. I loved the comment a little bit earlier. Here's that fancy word I was going to tell you about. Oh, you're not seeing it. Can you put it up on the screen just for a sec?
Did that fellow come to Jesus?
Did Brett come to Jesus? You know, they moved. They moved probably a year or so after. We kept in touch for a couple years. We haven't kept in touch with him after that. So I don't know that he's a follower of Jesus. It was, and yeah. I think we're in cultural captivity. What does that mean? It means that the culture's influenced us more than we've influenced the culture, right? Remember the Romans 12 passage? Don't get squeezed into the mold of the world. So here's I think this is the Message translation. With eyes wide open to the mercies of God, I beg you, my brothers, it should say brothers and sisters, as an act of intelligent worship, to give him your bodies as a living sacrifice, consecrated to him, acceptable by him. Don't let the world squeeze you into its own mold, but let God remold your minds from within, so you may prove in practice that the plan of God for you is good, meets all his demands, and moves towards the goal of maturity. All right. We're going to take a break in 5 minutes. Hang in there. We've drifted. I mentioned that already. And what I want to poke at tonight is this. You see this little triangular thing? Here we are on page 7. I think what's happened is we're starting in the wrong place. We ask the wrong questions. I think for several generations, and I think this is what, I don't think it was the intent of the seeker-targeted movement, but it was the result of it. We start with church questions. How do we grow this church? How do we get more people in here? How do we have programs that will reach people? How do we meet the needs of people? We're starting with, big fancy word, ecclesiology, church questions. And so what we do is we look at our neighborhoods and we say, okay, how do we grow a church? And then what inevitably happens is we make God in our image. So God becomes whoever is convenient to helping us to achieve our goals in our energy and our strength. I think the shift that needs to happen is we go to the next set of circles. We start in a different place. We start with who God is. I think the question to be faithful, not to be successful, to be faithful, is we need to ask who God is. And then we ask, what is he doing here in our midst? And then we say, because we are made in his image, how do we live so that we join him on mission and bear witness to who he is? Friends, that's a massive difference than what we've done for a long time. It's not new. It's just different than what we've fallen into. How do we make this church grow? Our numbers are shrinking. Our money's shrinking. You know, we're not getting as much money in. What's going wrong with this place? I hear that all the time. It's the wrong question. Who are you, God? Teach us. Show us who you are. Because we believe that you're present and active in this place. Give us eyes to see what you're doing. so that we might join with you and bear witness to who you are. That's what we're going to poke at this weekend. That one? Oh, hang on. This one. Next one. Yep. 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 Yeah, well said. And so I'm agreeing with you, and I'm just building on what you said. If we believe God is at work in the world, or said on mission, why in the world would we come up with our strategies and ask God to bless them? Well, because we're sheep, yes, we're sheep. That's a good point. So that's the thrust. I want to go, I think it's a little different than Blackaby, but we're on the right track by saying Blackaby. We're on the same page. Were you stretching or you just? Perfect. Good. Let me show you one thing and then we're going to take a break, all right? Let's see if. Zach, what happened? It disappeared. Help me. Next one. No, it's gone.
Can you blank us?
I can do it after the break. Ah, there we go.
Should it just?
Oh, we can just play it from there, no? Didn't.
Okay, let me try one more thing.
I'm so glad Zach is here. I am what they call a Luddite. Yes. No, a Luddite is somebody who is useless with technology. Doesn't learn.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people.
Will it play?
It's just not wanting to.
Well, just if you just go in here, will it go?
Well, if I do that, we'll do this.
Oh, it does the same thing again.
It's just black.
Okay.
Okay, we're gonna do one more thing. Just I'll get it set up and then we'll just.
How about we take a break and we work on it during the break? Is it?
Because it's right there.
Okay, he's got it.
Okay, we're live.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people have prayed these well-known words
Okay.
as a way of expressing their
take a break.
devotion to God. They're called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our.
Now it's
You get
stopped.
13 seconds back of your life. Sorry.
For thousands of years, every morning and evening, Jewish people have prayed these well-known words as a way of expressing their devotion to God. They're called the Shema. Hear, O Israel, The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And as for you, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your strength. Now, the first word of the Shema is hear or listen, which in Hebrew is pronounced Shema. That's where the prayer gets its name. Now, Shema is a really common word in the Hebrew Bible, and it's obvious why. Hearing is a very universal activity. It's usually connected with the ear, as in Proverbs chapter 20, ears that shema and eyes that see, the Lord has made them both. Now that seems basic enough, but if you look at the other ways that Hebrew authors can use the word Shema, they use it to mean more than just let sound waves enter your ear. In Hebrew, Shema can also mean pay attention to or focus on. So when Leah, who wasn't loved by her husband Jacob, she has a son, and she names him Simon, or in Hebrew, Shim'on, because, she says, the Lord has sham'ad, that I am unloved. So Shema means to hear and to pay attention to, and even more. It can also mean responding to what you hear. This is why so many of the cries for help in the book of Psalms begin with a call that God listen. Psalm 27, verse 7. Shema my voice when I call, O Lord. Be merciful, answer me. So asking God to shema is at the same time asking God to act, to do something. It's similar to when God asks people to listen. Like when the people of Israel come to Mount Sinai, God says, if you shema me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all the nations you will be my treasured possession. Now, there's a couple interesting things about this verse in Exodus. In Hebrew, the word shema is repeated twice in this sentence to give it emphasis. If you shema, meaning listen closely. But also notice that from God's point of view, listening is basically the same as keeping the covenant. So when God asks the people to shema, what he means is that they listen and obey. And that's the last fascinating thing about Shema. In ancient Hebrew, there is no separate word for obey, meaning to carry out the wishes of someone who knows better than you or is in authority over you. So in the Bible, if you want to say, I will listen and do what you say, you use the single word, Shema. In Hebrew, listening and doing are two sides of the same coin. This is why later in Israel's history, when the people were breaking their covenant promises to God, the Hebrew prophets would say things like, they have ears, but they're not listening. The Israelites, of course, could hear just fine, but they weren't actually listening, or else they would act differently. And so in the end, listening in the Bible is about giving respect to the one speaking to you and doing what they say. Real listening takes effort and action, and that's the Hebrew word Shema.
So our time this weekend will be focused on love the Lord your God with all of your heart. That's the Shema, the beginning of the Shema. Love the Lord your God with all your mind. Love the Lord your God with all your strength. And then by the time we get to the New Testament, we've added, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those are 5 pieces that we're going to look at, because I'm deeply convinced that if we understand who God is in each of those areas, we can then discover how we should act as followers of Jesus, right? So that's what we're up to. It's 21 minutes after 8. Can we start again at 8:30? It's not very long, but it gives you enough time to eat some yummy things at the back and get water or coffee or whatever, go to the bathroom, and we'll come back for the last hour together. not yet. There we go. Got it. All right. Thank you for your energy. It's good. I know it's the 8:30 to 9:30 hour, so hopefully you had enough sugar that we keep going. Was there anything in that first introductory session you want to poke at just quickly? I want to make sure we're all on the same page so that as we begin to build this, we got the foundation laid fairly.
I just want to make a point with the churches now. It's pretty sad. Churches are going after churches, putting the other church down. I'm better than this one put this. All I say is, what a bad other.
Well, there's probably some of that, but there's also probably some of people walking away from the church, and I want to say, wait a minute. This was God's plan. And I think that when a Christian community bears witness to who God is, there's hope. So, yeah. Sorry, I cut you off. Yeah.
Here, like what you're saying here,
Here,
and then listen,
listen.
and then
Those were all part of Shema, weren't they? Yeah, that's good. Anything else we want to poke at? Otherwise, I'm going to dive into session 2. We're on page 10. All right. Stop asking church questions. Ask God questions. Who are you, God? Teach us who you are. And help us to pay attention to what you're doing so we can participate. And we can bear witness to who you are. I would love 3 or 4 of you to be bold. I'm going to restrict you to no more than a minute each. Otherwise, remember the Gong Show, the old Gong Show on the TV? A big hook comes out and pulls you off, right? I would love you to tell us, when you think about a person that has most influenced you towards Jesus, who is it, and how have they influenced you? Like, what was it about them that caught your attention? 3 or 4 of you. Yeah, go for it. Who? Who influenced you towards Jesus and how? So it was their sense of freedom, their sense of openness? Is that what? Accepting you as you are. Okay? Somebody else. Yeah.
I think as a kid, I remember God giving my what where the rubber hit the road was going down. They lived what they believed,
Oh,
and that is where his glory.
there was an authenticity, right? Yeah. It's good. Yeah.
I had a Sunday school teacher named Mrs. Bueller, who so loved the word that she made it fun to be in the
Huh.
The word was an adventure.
Yeah. Good. Okay. One more.
My 2 grandmothers.
Okay. What was it about them?
Well, one was very Catholic, and she had 12 children. And it was just, and my other one was Church of England. And both of them, they were so the simplicity and what God was teaching them, and just the faithfulness every day to take time to read the Bible, and just believe what, like one day she said her hearing aids quit working, and she says, I put my hand up to my ear, and I said, God, I don't have any more doubt that you're gonna fix this. And then she could start hearing.
Oh, wow.
So it was just their simplicity and just their consistency.
There's a thread running through these, and maybe I'm stretching it a bit, but I think it's similar to one of the men for me was a man by the name of Harold Wakeford. So at 17, my family moved to England. My dad became a pastor of a fairly big church in England, but what was more important than it being big in terms of numbers, oh, wow, I'd never met people like this. These people loved Jesus. It was obvious. And the first Sunday we were there, so I'm this 17-year-old kid, ripped away from high school in Canada, moved to England, and I'm sitting there in the midst of this sort of weird place. And here comes this guy, 6'2", 6'3". He was a gardener. He had massive hands. And it's right in the middle of service, and he starts to pray. Now, okay, I'm going to try. My accent's not very good, but Dear Father, oh, dear Father, we bless you from the bottom of our hearts, Lord. We bless you for the bumblebees today, Lord, because they flit from flower to flower and get honey that we can put on our toast, Lord. It's amazing. And he went on and on. One of the elders had to come over and sit Harold down. I guess he did this a lot. But, you know, over the next 4 or 5 years, I went back to school in the States and would come back and visit my parents. Harold would always have me over, and I just couldn't get enough of Harold because he was infectious. Like the joy that was there, the love that this man had for Jesus, I was just like, okay, I want what he wants and what he's got, right? And my guess is that most of us are not, well, I mean, we're impressed by people that work hard, but we're way more transformed by people who love Jesus from the bottom of their hearts. Okay, now here's the tough part. Would anybody say that about you? So, talk to me a little bit about how much does God love us? And don't just say a lot. Where's the evidence? Where do you see it? Yeah.
Well, I have been healed several times in different ways by simply having God able to pray and anoint and speak the word over me. And I know that nothing will ever happen to me that God doesn't want.
So we see, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. We see his activity in our life, and how can we deny how much he loves us? Okay, how else?
But he would choose to give up being God for a season.
Yeah, humbled himself, became flesh.
To give up all of the surrender.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, somebody else. Can I read a couple scriptures? That was wonderful. Thanks, Barb. A couple scriptures for us. Even if you want to just close your eyes, just soak this in. For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide, long, high, and deep is the love of Christ. And to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Is it possible that we are bearing false witness about the love of God for the world? So when we talk about being a missional church, for sure we're going to get to backyard barbecues, outreach program. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. But I'm going to do that last on purpose. This is what a missional church is. A church that's helping its people bear witness to the love of God by becoming, by that desire, that affection that's in us. Is Jesus the greatest affection of our hearts? If he's not, we might be bearing false witness. Now, come on, this is a whole life journey that we're on. So this is not a guilt trip. This is not a, well, if he's not, something's wrong with you. No, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to live into the reality of how much he loves us, and therefore we become conduits and we love him back. And when my neighbor looks at me, does he see the love of Jesus in me? Because I tell you, today I think people are less interested in our words than they are in our actions and how we demonstrate this. Not just loving them, but seeing where the priorities of my life are. Seeing where the deepest affections of my life are. Here's another one. Listen to this. You know where the text is. I'm not going to tell you, but you know where it is. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us first and sent his Son as an atoning sacrifice for our sins. Dear friends, since God loved us, we also ought to love one another. You know the text. What does it say about God there? It says his nature is love. He can't be anything but love. He can't do anything that's not loving. Oh, but there's something else that's important here. If God's nature is love, he becomes the source and the initiator of all love. Oh, that's going to mess us up a bit. That's going to mess us up. How does that mess us up? If God's nature is love, okay, I think we can handle in our minds the fact that everything he does, therefore, originates in love, even though sometimes we're like, God, why did you let that happen? That feels so hurtful. No, it's love. The Bible tells us that it's love. We don't always understand it. But the one we have a hard time with is that everything that's loving originates from him. Ooh. So when I see somebody of a different faith acting in love, what does it mean? That's hard. That's a hard one for us, right? But we got to grapple with that. It doesn't mean it translates properly. It doesn't mean they have the right belief. But God is love, and he's in the midst of that. Somehow, some way. I got a finite mind. I can't figure that all out. I want to talk about two things in response. You remember our little triangle, our circles. We ask church questions, and instead we need to ask God questions. So the God question is, how much does God, how do we describe his love? How do we live out his love? And so now what I want to do is respond both personally and corporately. Look in your notes, bottom of page 10, it says personal response to Christ. Skip past that and come with me to page 11 to corporate response to Christ, because I need to get you guys working. I'm going to come back to the personal one first thing in the morning. It's a little bit more devotional-like, and rather than me tell you a devotional story tonight, I'm going to get you working. So, how do we respond to God in love in the same way. I mean, we can't. Obviously, we can't. But we need to bear witness. And let me suggest this. One of the ways that we can demonstrate our love for him is in the way we worship. One of the ways. Not the only way. It's not all about Sunday morning. But I do want to talk about Sunday morning. Because what we do on a Sunday morning is part of joining God on mission. Sometimes in missional church we hear this, get rid of Sunday morning. I don't want you to get rid of Sunday morning. I do want most churches to get rid of the reason that they have Sunday morning, which is, let's see if we can get everybody in here. No, there's something different about Sunday morning, and I want us to explore it together. All right? So, if you have a Bible, you're welcome to turn with me to one of the most missional passages in all of Scripture. I know most of you have memorized it. Leviticus chapter 1. That's in the Old Testament, you guys. And I'm not going to make you do it. I'll do the reading, okay? Here it comes. I'm going to read the whole chapter. I need new glasses. Leviticus chapter 1. This is the word of the Lord. The Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. He said, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock. If the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you are to offer a male without defect. You must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting so that it will be acceptable to the Lord. You are to lay your hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord. And then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar at the entrance to the tent of meeting. You're to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron, the priest, are to put fire on the altar and arrange wood on the fire. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat, on the wood that is burning on the altar. You're to wash the internal organs and the legs with water, and the priest is to burn all of it on the altar. It's a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from either the sheep or the goats, you're to offer a male without defect. You're to slaughter it at the north side of the altar before the Lord, and Aaron's sons, the priests, shall splash its blood against the sides of the altar. You're to cut it into pieces, and the priest shall arrange them, including the head and the fat, on the wood that is burning on the altar. You're to wash the internal organs and the legs with water, and the priest is to bring all of them, burn them on the altar. It's a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. If the offering to the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, you're to offer a dove or a young pigeon. The priest shall bring it to the altar, wring off the head, and burn it on the altar. Its blood shall be drained out on the side of the altar. He is to remove the crop and the feathers, throw them down east of the altar where the ashes are. He shall tear it open by the wings, not dividing it completely. Then the priest shall burn it on the wood that is burning on the altar. It's a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. Do you know some traditions say after reading of the text, brothers and sisters, this is the word of the Lord? And people respond, thanks be to God. But this is weird. I mean, we read this in the 21st century and we think, what in the world? All right. You get to do some work around your tables. I hope you like the people at your tables because you get to work with them for a little bit. No burnt offerings at the tables, no. Here are the questions. I think they're in your notes, but let me paraphrase them. How in the world is this missional? Right? So there's the first question. Then second of all, we know that it's about an act of worship. How does it speak to our gatherings, our worship times? What do we need to learn from this? Well, we don't sacrifice animals. So what do we need to learn? So first, how is it missional? Second, this will take the longer part. Make a list of things that you can glean from this. What do we need to pay attention to in our gatherings? All right? I'm going to give you, it's just 10 to, I'm going to give you about 13 minutes around your table. I'll walk around a little bit and heckle you or help you, one of the two. See how we do, all right? 2 questions. All right, can I call you back? How'd you do? You ready to throw something at me, or is it okay? We're still okay. Okay. Buckle up. We got 25 minutes to rearrange our Sunday morning gatherings. You ready? Uh-oh. I might get in trouble from Frank. Frank, you better listen to this next part in case I'm in big trouble. Okay, who's going to be bold enough to take a swing at why is this or how is this missional? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a fair comment. We're working at it. Well, okay, hold that, Barb. Hold that. It's good. It's right. But I want to go, how is this missional? Or maybe you're saying that's why it's missional, because they brought something.
Can you give us a brief definition of missional?
I can. I should have done that before. I apologize. I think we ask church questions, and therefore we come up with new programs, new models, new way of being the church, trying to get more people in. Missional equals a renewed, I think it's in the notes, but copy this down if it's not. And we'll poke at this a bit tomorrow too. Renewed theological vision of the church. Okay, you don't have to write it. Renewed theological vision of the church on mission, serving as a sign, servant, foretaste of the kingdom. Now, I know that's a lot, but here's the part that you need to know for tonight. It's about God. Renewed theological vision. We see God, and he's at work in the world. Therefore, here's who we are. Not we came up with a great strategy to get a whole bunch of people here on Sunday. Where were the Jews when this was written? In the wilderness. They left Egypt. They're not in the promised land yet. They're in the wilderness. So God gives them these instructions for worship when they're in the wilderness. Why were they going to the promised land? Because they won the Stanley Cup and they were getting sent to Disneyland. You know, I grew up thinking the idea that God loved the Jews more than he loved anybody else. Why did God send his people into the promised land? I heard it back here. Half right. Where does that come from? Do you remember? There you are. Genesis 12. Okay, come back in your minds with me to Genesis 12. God's talking to Abram. Changes his name in a minute. And what is the promise to Abram? I'm going to make you the father of a great nation. And then he articulates that a little bit later. What's the second part? I'm going to bless you. How is he going to bless them? He's going to bless them by being present with them. And what's the third part that we always forget? You just said it. Somebody said it over here. We always forget that. What's the purpose of God creating them to be a nation and blessing them? So that he could be a blessing. They would be a blessing to other peoples. How does that happen? They go and bear witness to his presence in the midst of all these other places. Why is he sending them to the promised land? So they will be a blessing. Why does God give them these instructions about worship then? How is it missional? I'm convinced it's missional because God gives them instructions on how to worship because he knows them. He knows how fickle they are. It's a good thing we aren't like that, but they were fickle. Because what happens is they go into the promised land, and what do they see? They see all kinds of different people worshiping their gods. And man, you can see these gods. You can touch them. Not our God. We can't see our God. Where are you again? He knew that they were fickle and they would be seduced into worshiping other gods. How often does that happen for us? So he gives them very, very, very specific examples of how to worship, so that when they go through their worship, they will be a blessing to other people. They will bear witness to who he is. That's the missionary impulse in Leviticus 1. Now, we read this text. It's weird. Here's what happens when a Jew reads this text. They are cut to the heart immediately, and they know full well you cannot worship the only true God unless you worship him with everything that you have. That's what a Jew reads in Leviticus 1. If I do not worship God with everything I have, I'm making a mockery of him. I'm blaspheming. I'm not bearing witness. So God sends them into the promised land so they would bear witness, and they know they better give their all. Sunday mornings, the hardest mornings. Getting the kids up, they're fighting. There's more fights. There were more fights in our house on Sunday morning than any other day of the week. Kids arguing about this and doing that, get in the car. No, I mean, it was just, And you get there and you're just like, you're doing your best just even to get in the door. Jews understood that you do not bear witness to God properly unless you give him your all. A little secret. I was doing this sermon in Calgary a couple of years ago. And I came to a point in the sermon. It's like 11:25. The service started at 11. And I was talking about giving God our all. And like how some people walk in late with Starbucks cups. I was literally watching people walk in with Starbucks cup late. I was just like, you got to give them your all. People were laughing. So what do we learn about worship in this text? What's there? What's there? Let me give you the first one. Let's talk. If there's nothing else here, this is the most important. Everybody brought something. Most of the time here in North America, in Canada particularly, what are our worship services about? They're about what I get. What do I get out of this? I'm going to a different church. Yeah, the preaching's not that good. I don't get anything out of it anymore. I have a friend who's a fairly famous speaker in the States, and he was telling the story once. He said, you go to another church and you preach, and let's be honest. You can give 25 times by going to 25 different churches. Nobody knows. You're pretty good at a sermon after 25 times, right? Local person, they give it once and then that's it. So they get one shot at it. So he said, I gave this sermon, and he said, I'd done it 25 times. It was pretty good. So he said, at the end of the gathering, this guy comes up to him and says, oh, man, that was fantastic. Thanks. Yeah, I've been thinking of leaving the church here. Oh, how come? I just don't get anything out of the sermons anymore here. They're not feeding. So my friend said, oh, interesting. He said, I just really want to thank you. I want to thank you for being honest with me. Oh, well, yeah, no problem. No, I want to really thank you for being honest, because, like, how long have you been a Christian? Guy says, 25 years. He said, oh. That after 25 years, you still need somebody to spoon feed you. Ooh. You don't come here to get fed. We do get fed, but what do we come here for? To bring something. What if every church in Canada actually got that right? Instead of it all being about consumerism and getting something, it was about teaching our people that every Sunday they come and they bring something. What do we bring? Name them out loud. What are some things we bring? Low-hanging fruit offerings. Okay, got that one out of the way. Now what? What do we bring? Encouragement. Okay, what does that look like? Word of prophecy? Prayer? Okay. We're looking around and we're paying attention to other people, but you have to stay in your seat, don't you? Oh, good. Good, I like it. I like it. Do you know how many churches you have to, like, they don't say it, but it's kind of, stay there, don't walk around. We encourage our people to walk around. Walk around, pay attention to where the Spirit of God is at work, and go and bless somebody. Pray for them, hug them, whatever. Okay, what else do we bring? Yeah, what kind of? Okay, spiritual gifts, okay. Is there a place for them? Not always. We'll keep working on it. Yeah. What else do we bring? Food, yeah. Food, love that. I think we bring stories. Testimonies, stories. Don't answer this out loud. What percentage of people in the church in Canada do you think could tell you a story of where they've seen God, His presence, His power at work that week? The answer I usually get is around 10%. I don't think it's scientific. It's just a gut call. Why is it that we haven't taught our people to discern the presence of God so that they can tell stories? Hey, this week, guess what? I saw God here. And why don't we create, I think you probably do already, but why don't we create space in our gatherings to tell stories? Well, you don't know our church. Our church, you know what would happen? We'd get the same people up every week telling these stupid stories. It's messy, for sure it's messy, right? I get it. And you got to work on it. And there's ways to work on it. But I promise you some of our best Sundays are when I don't preach. Oh, that sounded bad. I don't preach because people are telling stories of where God's at work. My sermon will keep. Those stories shouldn't keep. We bring stories because we're paying attention through the week. And we bring as an offering. Okay, so there's the first one. We bring instead of get. That takes intentional design that we can do that. And it takes years of helping our people. Okay, what else was there? What did you notice?
Well, the first thing I noticed was, now the Lord called Moses. So that's at Shema,
Okay,
right? So Moses would have had to actually hear.
okay. How does that relate to our gatherings? I'm just missing the point, so help me with that.
We have to hear what God's saying, like before we.
Oh, very good. Okay, prepared.
Come prepared and
We had this guy in our church. His name was Wayne. And Wayne sat right here every Sunday when I preached. And he would fall asleep every single sermon. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. Like, okay, I'm not the greatest speaker in the world, but I'm okay. Why does he fall asleep all the time? Then I found out. He plays hockey till 2 a.m. on Saturday night. By the time he comes home and sort of unwinds, it's 3:30, 4 o'clock. He has little kids. He's up by 6:30 or 7. He's exhausted. I get it. So now I know why he falls asleep. It's not my sermon. He plays hockey till. Okay, so what's my point? My point is, I think we have to prepare properly. So,
prepare and be in his presence.
yeah, I was getting there for sure. So, well, it starts with, why do we stay up so late on Saturday? It's the weekend. I get to stay up. Actually, I want to go to bed at a decent hour on Saturday, so I'm at my best on Sunday. And I want to get up early. I heard this story around the room from several people. I want to get up early, and I want to either worship on my own, read the text on my own, be in his presence on my own, so that when I come, I'm ready. I agree with you. What's what?
What if you have to play hockey?
You have to make a choice.
Change your priorities.
You have to make a choice. The greatest affection, it is hard. But here's the issue about affection, right? What else is in the text? So we prepare ourselves. That's good. What else?
Well, and sometimes he'll tell us what to do.
Sure. For sure. What are the other lessons we can learn about worship in this text?
There's an aroma that's pleasing to the Lord.
Oh, okay. Tell me what that's like. How does that affect? What's the parallel to today?
Well, we were mentioning about how people in our lives, or people see us and say, I want to be like that person.
Okay.
And that's a pleasing memory or pleasing to.
Oh, I like that.
So is our life pleasing to the Lord? Are we a pleasing aroma to the Lord?
I want to be careful not to embarrass anybody here tonight. When we were worshiping earlier, I was watching because it just blessed me. And I was watching certain people do certain, an easy one is like we're watching people worship like that. But there were other people that were doing more than that. And it was just a huge smile on my face. There was just a blessing. That was like an aroma, is what you're saying. I love that. Can I put my slides on the screen for a sec? So I want to just go through these. We're running out of time, and I want to be able to. So I had down 8 lessons for worship. You've got a few of them already. So Jews understood you could not worship a holy God without worshiping with everything you had. Okay, we said that one. So the second one, we come to bring, not to receive. We got that one. Third one, it's costly. It's costly. We bring our best. It wasn't like there were the bulls, the sheep or goats, and then the birds, right? And it wasn't like the rich people could give a bird and be done with it. You had to bring that which was costly. I want you to picture a scene, go back 2,000 years. You've got a father and son. It's their turn to bring the bull to the temple for slaughter. How many bulls do you think a rich family had in those days? Really rich might be 3 or 4, most 1. Rich people. Middle class and lower class didn't have any. So here's the sometimes we read these things and we think, like a farm in Texas, hundreds of thousands. No. 3, and 2 of them weren't very good. And so they had their prized bull, right? And the father says to the son, Isaac, could you go behind our shed, and it's our turn to bring the bull? And would you bring, our A bull? Not the B or C one, but the A one. And Isaac says to his Dad, you got to be kidding. Like, that we have our A bull scheduled to do the bull thing over the next number of months. And that's our livelihood. We can't take him. Can't we take number C? Number C is ready for slaughter anyways. No, son, we have to give our A bull. Why? We give him the best, but why do we give our best? Because now we're dependent on the Lord. But Dad, we won't know where the food's going to come from. It's okay, son. You bring him your best so that you're developing this dependency on him to supply. Remember the conversation we had at the beginning where it was all about doing things in our own strength? We have to get into practices that switch that. We bring that which is costly. We bring our best. But you say for a minute, well, wait a minute. Like Frank, you led that worship time so beautifully. You have a nice voice. You play the guitar so well. Like, you don't want me up there doing that. So God's more pleased with Frank's offering of singing and leading tonight than he would be with mine. Not so. Because as long as I bring my best, even if it's not from the world's perspective as good as Frank's best, it's still to our Father my best. I'm giving him my best. We have this guy in our church, his name's Dal. I love Dal. He's a terrible singer. He's so bad. But he sings so loudly. He's one of those guys that, like if you're standing 2 or 3 people on either side of him, you can't sing. Because it's just like he's so out of tune that it's just like you can't stay on tune. And sometimes you're like, just shut up. And then you just smile and you go, no, he's bringing his best. And the Father is pleased, right? It's like grade 1. Remember when the kids were in grade 1? They bring the pictures back from school that they've colored at school that day. It's their best. And where do they go? Where do you put those pictures? On the fridge. My son Matt was in grade 1. He comes home. Dad, look what I did at school today. I'm looking at this thing. I have no idea what it is. Oh, Matt, that's so good. What is it? Dad, it looks like a whale, Matt. It's not a whale, it's you. Oh. It's a true story. He did that. That one didn't go in the fridge. That one missed the fridge. But we bring our best, and our Father is pleased with our best. Here's another one. It takes our whole being. It's not just an intellectual exercise. I hope that there's permission given. I think I've already heard it, for people to move around, for people to engage. I've seen it. I witnessed it tonight. We did something really silly one week. Dan is the guy that usually sets up the chairs. We're in a room about this size in one of our campuses, and we put right where this camera is in the middle, we put the cross. And we told Dan not to set the chairs up. So there's nothing but the cross in the middle. And I think we were talking about the Trinity that day. And there's a old word, perichoresis, that talks about the Father, Son, and Spirit in relationship like 3 little girls dancing with joy. That's the picture that it gives. So we just thought, we're gonna actually do this, and we're gonna dance around the cross. So people came in, and they thought, oh, Dan must be sick, so they started to pull the chairs down. No, don't put the chairs down. So we did this. We went around. And then by the time it came time to preach, we pulled the chairs down. It was fine. When we first started dancing around the cross, do you remember junior high dances? You know what happens at junior high dances? Like, everybody's against the wall, right? Like, nobody wants to get on. Eventually, we all got on there. But it wasn't really a dancing. It was kind of like a march in a circle around. It was awful. But we were doing something, right? Like, it took all of our beings. Instead of just sit down, stand up, sit down, stand up, think, we got involved in something. We get home from church. We were having family dinner, and my eldest, who was probably 16 or 17 at the time, said, so whose idea was that, Dad? I said, that was mine. She goes, don't you ever do that again. That was a bad idea. It's messy. It wasn't just the priests that were slaughtering the animals. People got involved. It's messy. It's okay that it's messy. we like to sometimes be so pristine and so clean and not allow for any hiccups. Almost done. It was done in community. This wasn't a gathering of individuals. This was a gathering of the community of God's people. They all participated. They all had something to offer. That's the seventh one. Everyone should participate. How do you get more and more people involved? I have a friend in England that's written a book about it, Multi-Voice Church, it's called. Just thinking through, how do we keep getting more people involved? Last one. It's a dramatic enactment of the gospel story. Did you read that in Leviticus 1? That's what it is. It's the atonement. And it's the atonement in the Old Testament looking forward to Jesus. Jesus is all through that text. And what the Jews were doing is they were going into the promised land, sent in the promised land to bear witness to God. They were enacting the gospel story. It was like a drama. Okay, we're New Testament. How do we do that? What's it look like? We don't slaughter bulls and sheep and pigeons. What do? How do we enact the gospel story? It's communion. Remember me and proclaim what I've done every time you do this. That's what communion is. Now, I got to be honest, in lots of Baptist churches, that's my tradition. Once a month, whether we want to or not, but it's the first Sunday, we pass the little plates with little thin wafers that taste like cardboard, and we pass the thimbleful of juice. And we pass it around, and that's communion. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, would somebody fix that? We are celebrating Jesus and what he did. We're celebrating the gospel. I want to do it with more than a stupid little cracker. We do it every week now. It's the pinnacle. Forget the sermon. The sermon's okay. It's okay. Try my best. But the table, the presence of Jesus is in the table. Every time you do this, remember me. Proclaim my death and my resurrection till I come. We tell the story. Make sure that every time you gather, you're inviting people to bring things, because they're not just getting something, they're bringing something of worth for the King. It's messy. Everybody participates. It's costly. They bring their best. But they're telling the story through the way that we gather. Some of my favorite communions, we have a big table in the middle of the room, and everybody brings, some people bring a loaf of fresh baked bread. Some people bring bottles of juice, and because of the neighborhood we're in and high level of alcoholic stuff, we stay away from the wine in our gatherings, but we bring the best. And it's a 15, 20-minute time in our service. Do you know what it smells like in there? When it's all these loaves of fresh bread? There's an aroma. Oh, is that good? And we pay attention to who he is. We tell the story. All right. This is about responding, reflecting how much God loves us. We're going to respond back to him. We do that corporately. Lots of other ways, but we're going to pick that up tomorrow. Let me pray for us and send us home to get a good rest. All right? I want to lead you in this just for a minute or two. Tomorrow I'm going to tell you about some practices that we do as a church that don't save us. They just shape us, form us. And one of our practices is at the end of the day, we stop and we say, here's where I saw you today, Lord. So don't need you to do it out loud, just in your head. Where did you experience God's presence today? Maybe it was an act of love. Maybe there was joy. Maybe there was encouragement from a friend. Maybe it was even more tangible than that. Maybe you saw the power of God at work through an answered prayer or some act of kindness that you just knew was from Jesus. Thank him for that. Maybe there was something today that, some moment when you said no to him. No, I'm going to do it my way. Thanks, but no thanks. You spoke badly to somebody. You thought badly of someone. Whatever it was, just put that right for a minute. Father, thanks for today. Thanks that you're a God that is present and working in the world. You're not a God that just made us and wound us up and let us go. You want to be intimately involved in the day-to-day things of our lives. So we say thanks for the ways that we saw you at work, for the times that we heard you speak. We say sorry for those things that, Lord, we either should have done and didn't, or shouldn't have done but did. And now would you watch over us as we rest? Give us good rest tonight, that we may awake tomorrow refreshed and eager to pay attention to where you're at work in our day tomorrow. For, Lord, life with you is so much better than anything we could ever imagine. So we bless you. In Jesus' name we prayed. Amen. Frank, what's the deal? Where are we tomorrow? What time?
Please come back tomorrow ready for, again, an exceptional morning and a little bit of the afternoon until 2 o'clock. So there will be a lunch we'll provide here. But if you know anyone who'd like to join us, well, please bring them along too. God bless you. Have a wonderful night. See you in the morning.
Can we leave our stuff on the table?
Can leave it all here.